Welcome, everyone. We are covering all things stakeholder management for those just reaching out and coming on board in terms of the other live that we're doing, but I'm also on Zoom. So apologies for my face kind of moving in different directions. So I guess when we're looking at stakeholders, the big thing to appreciate and acknowledge is like sometimes we're not even sure what a stakeholder is. That conversation, that language isn't necessarily something that is always spoken about when it comes to dietetics and our learnings and our nutrition kind of field. We love working with people and we do the servicing piece, but you may not appreciate that actually that is a part of stakeholder management. However, additional to that, there is the stakeholders when we're looking at, I guess that there can be people, there can be groups, there can be organizations, companies, but basically they have a vested interest in decision making or activities that you're doing. So anyone who has a vested interest in what you are doing or will decide or lead or influence what you are doing and the approach you're making is a stakeholder. So when we're looking in terms of the nutrition and dietetic space, for us personally, particularly in the sports space, our biggest stakeholders tend to be like high performance managers, coaches, corporations, organizations, and also clients, athletes. Outside of that, you've got lots of different stakeholders that I would do a disservice to try and list. All of those bigger pieces, I guess, that are deciding where your direction is, what your influence or impact is, and how you go about it. So why is it important? Well, I think it's everything. If you think about how we approach our clients, how we approach our partnerships, contracts, a happy stakeholder is a successful contract, in the way that if they're happy, you get to be happy too. So it's a really important thing, whether it's a client, whether it's an organization you're working with, whether it's a group. If you are doing a great job of managing that stakeholder, you are doing a really great job of getting a whole lot back positively on that role, but also being able to impact positively forward as well. So I guess the biggest part to this and managing stakeholders, and I think the place we've got to start is definitely in communication. We are excellent communicators as a profession, I feel, but sometimes the communication is a bit one-sided or it's a little bit biased in terms of we love communicating what we're passionate in, we love communicating what we believe in, and we love communicating what we love to help and what we know. However, we need to always lean in and always aim to get better in terms of that active listening piece. And we talk about that a lot in the academy, particularly when it comes to working with clients and athletes in that active listening, ensuring that we're meeting that person where they're at. And we can kind of take that bubble of theme and also transplant it into stakeholder management. Because if we're meeting that stakeholder where they're at and what's important to them, we're actually going to do a much better job in working alongside them and with them and impacting and collaborating forward. So you do need to take a lot of interest in what their concerns are, what their risks are in terms of their positioning, their role, all those types of things, what's important to them and what's a priority to them. And it's really important that you listen to that. So as an example, we might have the priority of reducing rates of disordered eating or refueling or eating enough or all these types of things, like let's say sporting side or like, just general nutrition things that we would like to achieve. However, we need to learn how to translate that to what is important to the stakeholder that we're talking to. An example on the client side is we might like to make sure that an athlete is eating enough and has high energy availability. And we might be like talking around their bone health, their growth, their reproductive health, all these types of things. However, we may not have listened and actually thought about what's important to that client. How do I sell and how do I focus on their priorities, their risk, what's meaningful to them? In terms of like a high performance manager or a manager, a decision maker, an executive, no matter what field or organization you're working with, it's really important that you don't just talk nutrition or nutrition science, you talk in the terms that mean something to them. What's important to them. In the clinical setting, that might be things like reduced illness severity, length of stay in hospital, recovery times, those types of things. In the sports setting, that might be overall athlete availability, longevity, resilience, those types of pieces where they've got athletes available for their games, but they've also got athletes available and progressing for a long period of time. In terms of asset management, basically. So that can be mental availability, but also physical availability. So translating all that science and nutrition that we know into reporting, communication, and what that means to performance and availability within their piece, because that's what's going to make them look good in their role. That's what's important to them. And that's why we need to, talk differently depending on what stakeholder we're talking to. And how we talk to a coach or how we talk to a SSM team might be different alongside that. So adapting those communications is so important. For example, our reporting for a client is different to how we report to a dietitian. It's different to how we report to a SSM team. And that's also different to how we report to high performance managers, executives, or coaching. So what they need to know is very different to what someone else might need to know. And that's totally okay. It might be coming from the same data, it might be the same themes, but we need to consider what is important to them and what are they going to listen to, and how can we show our value, our impact, or our need based around what they perceive as important, not what we perceive as important. There's a lot of swallowing of pride in this, but a lot of translational stuff and problem solving stuff as well. The other piece, I guess, and this isn't going to come shocking, is the importance of trust and transparency. I feel like we do vulnerability quite well sometimes, but I do feel like one thing that I'm often helping with in mentoring supervision is vulnerable conversation, in the space of, asking for feedback, making sure that we're bringing things forward for resolution or concern early and openly is also something we tend to not do. We might sit on something for a while. We may procrastinate on that for a while. We may avoid it. We tend to be, as humans, as in our profession, avoidant of conflict. And I think it's really important that we do practice and get better at those vulnerable conversations. So learning how to do that is so important. And if it's a space that you don't feel comfortable or confident in, making sure that you get someone on your side that is and is able to mentor and supervise you through that is honestly essential. It doesn't necessarily need to be a dietitian, but you can find dietitians, for example, in our Supervision Academy membership, that are specialists in that area. So just making sure you're exploring that is really important, and making sure that you don't feel like you need to do it on your own, because like anything, it's a skill. It's not something that comes naturally to various individuals. So making sure that we're working on in a really safe space is essential if we're going to progress through in terms of our roles or the provision of our roles and the budget within our roles as well. So I guess within that as a concept, the other thing I noted down to make sure that I covered today is balancing the interests of different stakeholders. So I can count numerous times where there's been conflict in terms of the needs or priorities of different stakeholders in a conversation, in an approach, and making sure that we're kind of having that ability to meet each stakeholder where they're at, while also appreciating that there might be competing or conflicting needs at play. So just to complicate that further, is another complexity, particularly in the space of nutrition. Sorry, I'm just getting a notification. I've been on Instagram for too long. Is around beliefs and bias that exist when it comes to food, nutrition. We will often come against, I guess is probably the word that I would use, or come across maybe less aggressive, different beliefs or experiences with food, and that N equals one approach to food or nutrition will come about, particularly in stakeholders that, in sport in particular. You'll definitely see it. GPs, you'll see it there where they're coming with different filters, and it can conflict on best practice. It can conflict on the needs of the client, and it's a really big struggle sometimes to make sure that you can kind of meet both people or communicate to both people effectively. And we'll go through a second different ways that you might be able to do that. It's also really important, I guess, because rightly or wrongly, sometimes we're not in a safe position within our contract security, safety, or power within a position to advocate as hard as we would like or have the voice that we would like. So sometimes there will be points in time where you can't adequately manage a stakeholder with a point of safety to take risks and to advocate really effectively. You do need security and safety. It's a really crucial part of innovation, in change, and managing change. So I think also taking time to go, you know what, I haven't always been able to do this effectively or to my best ability or look after the client however, you know, best I feel because I haven't felt safe or secure is a really important thing to consider and forgive yourself for and show compassion for yourself for. I know I've been in that position a fair few times before actually, and it has been hard to reflect back on it, but it's also really important to acknowledge I did the best that I could in the place that I was in and the security I felt at that time. The other piece, I guess, is like knowing when you can push and feeling safety, security, finding your people to be able to push and advocate and create change or awareness even in different subsets of your stakeholders is really important. Being calculated in that assertiveness. Again, rightly or wrongly, females in a male-orientated space such as sport, which, you know, I definitely talk a lot about sport because it's been my the biggest space that I've been in the last decade of my career, can be really challenging, and it's not necessarily an equal power play at all. The professional advocacy and also just like patience. I can't talk about that enough because sometimes and often we're not in positions for really long periods of time. There's a lot of turnover in staff in different areas of health in particular. And sometimes we don't even have the opportunity to show patience to achieve change and play the long game. But the long game is such a crucial part to stakeholder management if you do it well and if you have the opportunity to do it well. Like I definitely do not have any judgment for those who do feel like they do shift around contracts quite often or juggle a lot of contracts. It's really, really tricky to find that balance and security in professional environment as a result of just where nutrition is sitting at the moment, particularly in a few different spaces. So if you are someone who is working on the stakeholder management and like wanting to improve, the biggest things you want to make sure of is that not only are you showing patience in this approach and creating change, but also that communication piece. You want to show consistency as well. And I think the really big important thing, and it's part of that listening piece in the communication of effective stakeholder management, is asking and requesting feedback. What else do you need from me? What else do you want to see? What would be valuable to you? What kind of things mean something to you? What would you like to improve in the next 1 to 2 years while you're here? And then thinking about and reflecting back, well, how can I be a part of that? There was a beautiful chat by Bron Lundy, one of the dietitians for Rowing Australia, and she's an incredible human if you haven't met Bron. But she spoke beautifully about her experience in this very space where, you know, you come up against it. You know, I've had a high performance manager and head coach say to me up front, why on earth are we paying for you when we can have another tech analyst? And it's like, okay, all right, it's time to advocate for myself while I also want to just cry and hide in a corner. So it can feel really tough to go, hang on, why would they want to? Not why do I want to stay? That's not relevant. Why do I think I'm valuable? That is not relevant. But why do I need to stay for them? What am I going to give them beyond what, say, a tech analyst would do? For example, very different things, by the way. Terrible to have that comparison put on you, but it was put on me, by the way, while my baby was screaming in the background. So I just have this real trauma response to even talking about it. It was just a really tough thing to focus on explaining and describing while I also had a child that needed me. And I'm like, to be in that position by two older men was just really, really challenging. And, you know, I think the big thing is like, well, what's important to them? If I can help them have more available athletes, if I can help them improve their culture to have less risk, to be mentally available, less likely to have injury, more likely to have high performance outcomes, better adaptations, like what can I give them in terms of nutrition? And that's the conversation you have. You know, the way to that, or the way I'm doing that, is actually like really cool stuff, but it probably doesn't mean much to them, and they probably don't have the understanding to even acknowledge or know the different words or terminology I would use when I'm explaining that. So I think that's probably about it. It's really a whole lot of listening, a whole lot of adapting the communication strategies. There's a bit of to and fro. It's working out what you're willing to negotiate versus what is a non-negotiable. It's being willing to walk away if it's really conflicting and very toxic and not having a great impact on who you are or who you want to be or the direction you're able to be. I can confidently say we have walked away from certain stakeholders before because it did conflict too heavily. But we've also stayed for a really long time in other contracts because it has been the long game and we've had the opportunity and the autonomy to do that. So yeah, there's not a right or wrong answer, but also making sure that you're really confident in this space and being well mentored and supervised allows you to kind of navigate those difficult situations. The other thing, I guess, and what I wanted to just pull from is if you are wanting to improve in this space, then you do need to kind of elevate that part of your professional development and making sure that you're actively seeking that with curiosity, through conversation, through connection. As I said earlier, it doesn't need to be a dietitian. Often it's great to have these type of assistance and mentoring from a non-dietitian in the space of different vulnerable conversations, difficult conversations, and those in different positions, because that diversity of voice is just so effective and really, really needed. But yeah, I'll open up to questions now and see where we end up. So if you have questions, feel free to unmute and chat if you're on the Zoom, or you can shoot them through. All right. So one question we have got is, how do I build trust when someone is skeptical? I have these set like conversations in my head when I read questions like that, because I do have so many examples and it's not always successful examples. I feel like there's lots of mistakes that come up, but this is why reflection is so important, right? So how do I build trust when someone is skeptical? I think the big piece here is almost going back to readiness to change kind of concepts and thinking about what would success look like in navigating and progressing this relationship and this concept. So how do I build it is to consider where this person is at, because there's a really big difference between someone being skeptical and open and skeptical and curious versus someone who is skeptical and quite resistant and negative. And I've had both and I adore both in the way of the challenge because often skepticism is a mix between beliefs, bias, knowledge, all those types of things muddled together, and just personal experience in general, particularly when it comes to food. So I think, first of all, understanding someone's beliefs and bias and hopefully being able to hold that conversation to listen to what they feel is important, what their beliefs are, why their beliefs exist, and also what success looks like, so that you can then navigate how to actually build that trust. And sometimes that's a bit of to and fro, as I said. Sometimes it's a bit of negotiation and going, okay, I appreciate that. How about we do it this way then? Or how would this sound? Or what if we were to change it so it's, you know, a different time point or a different approach or a bit of both? And that can really definitely help. So making sure you're listening first will allow you to go, okay, this person is curious at a really good point of just awareness and wanting to learn and improve, and I can do it this way. Or this person is really critical and not even near curiosity. And so we may need to actually do things a little bit differently, have very different conversations and be a little bit more direct, or be a whole lot more thoughtful in what we do push forward with and what we need to wait on. Another question. What to do when you have got non-adherence from a client, but pressure from the referrer? Yes. When we're looking at like non-compliance, non-adherence, I always like to reflect on our language around that in a real kind way, because sometimes it's a reflection of how we've approached that person is often not with autonomy for their direction or their decision making, but also it may not have met them where they're at or what they need in that moment of time. So that it's not necessarily a negative when we see non-adherence or non-compliance on that person. It may be that we can reflect and go, actually, I've noticed that you're finding this really tough. That may actually be on me in the information and the guidance I've given you, and not appreciating that it's not necessarily achievable or something that is important to you right now. So let's renegotiate, let's jig that and find a better fit, and allowing them to better guide their own direction or the things they focus on. I appreciate that's only one part of the question. The real part of the question is actually, how do you cope with that non-adherence when you've got pressure from the referrer or the key stakeholder that they do need a result? So when you do need a result and you're getting the pressure, it's really important to have that conversation without the client there, around what are their expectations? Why do they need that? Why is it time sensitive? What's the result for? What does success look like? And also alongside that, you can start to really listen to what else success could mean, because say they're not getting the results in terms of weight outcome, and so it's perceived as non-adherence. What other measures or markers of success can you bring into that conversation to go, okay, I absolutely appreciate you need to see this, and I can now understand why that's important. Over on this side, this is actually what's really important to them right now and what they've got the capacity to do. What if we also measure success in these different areas? So you can start to kind of have that conversation that is both sides feeling a whole lot more in control of the situation, but also in part of that communication as well. So again, listening, there's definitely a trend here, but also asking those really thoughtful questions so the stakeholders themselves can actually reflect of, oh, let's actually navigate what success is. What do I actually need? Maybe I thought it was this, but also maybe we can get success in these ways as well, so that you've got a bit of a collaborative approach. Awesome. I think that's all the questions. If anyone else has got anything, please yell out. But otherwise, we will wrap up. For those who are new to Academy and haven't joined us before, we'll definitely email you with some more details of the Academy. The Academy is something we built a couple of years ago. We started it out of a seen need to get dietitians ready for the future of nutrition care, utilizing technology, embracing change, really leaning into behavior change, not just the science. We're great at the science. We love the science, right? But I think sometimes meeting our clients where they're at and enabling change is really where we need to focus a whole lot more of our time and efforts. And that's what we do in the Academy. We also have an amazing community, which have a lot of great chats, reaching out for help, but also just navigating tricky conversations or stakeholder management or sharing cute puppies of our dogs and babies. It's a really nice little connection. So there's different membership options for the Academy. We have, just the community-based membership, which does research updates and community access for $10 a month, and it goes upward from there in terms of getting access to modules. And we've actually got some stakeholder management modules coming out, hence why we've covered this topic. But the latest one to be released is actually on all things neurodiversity and working with clients that are living with neurodivergence. So I highly recommend becoming a member, because the work that our team have done on getting that together has been incredible. So thank you so much. And also, if you feel like you do need additional support, individual support, there's different memberships for group supervision in this space, but also individual supervision as well. Even if financially or like just vulnerability wise, you don't want to do the individual supervision as yet, group supervision comes included in our middle tier membership, which includes all the modules and everything plus group supervision. And anyone who's been to a group supervision session will likely vibe on how amazing they are. They're just fantastic conversations. It's really, small numbers, great conversation, really great connection, and you get advice and ideas from some incredible people. So yeah, thank you so much for listening today. Would love to see you join our community, and we'll chat very soon. Thanks, everyone. Bye. Oh, thanks, Sarah. Thanks, hon. Thanks, team.